This film is going to talk about the key features of genocide that I'd like you to keep in mind as we go forward for the next few weeks discussing this topic, as well as to explain what is genocide. The United Nations, in the aftermath of World War II and the Holocaust, defined this word genocide. Um, Genocide, in their formulation, meant any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part. That rhetoric about in whole or in part ensures that this definition would be quite broad and could encompass a wide range of activities committed in a society towards an ethnic, religious, or racial minority. The word genocide had been coined by a Polish lawyer named Raphael Lemkin. You see there on the right. In the year 1944, in the midst of the horrors of the Holocaust that were occurring in his native Poland. Poland being one of the central locations where the Nazis had organized their apparatus of murder. The death camps, for example, were centered oftentimes in Poland. And he saw and observed firsthand the nightmare that was being perpetrated in his country. And he would coin the word that would ultimately be defined by the United Nations in 1948. Now, there's several key features of genocide that I want you to recognize and to keep an eye out as we read and watch film and documentaries, related to genocide. Firstly, genocides begin from above most often, not from below. Genocides are state-sponsored. That is, they are government-organized attacks on these ethnic, religious, or racial minorities. Regular everyday people like you and me are not usually those initiating genocide, but oftentimes it's those who are the official leaders, those in government or in the military, who are organizing of genocide attacks. Secondly, genocides occur during times of war most often. And I think there's probably a couple of key reasons for that. One being wars will certainly kick into overdrive and intensify a society's hatreds toward its particular enemies or perceived enemies. And this intensification of these hatreds comes to provide justification for what are more and more vicious attacks. So it's in times of war when we see genocide erupting. Another problem here related to war and its connection to genocide is how war will also limit the ability of outsiders and outsider nations to help. This was certainly the case during the Holocaust. The world knows what's going on in Nazi-occupied Europe, but isn't in a position really at the time to do much about it. This is also a key problem in Rwanda and Central Africa in 1994. Careful organization. Genocide is not haphazard. It is not random. It's not the result of psychotic behavior. It's not the result of, as some would claim, the devil made them do it. Genocide occurs because it's state orchestrated, because it's carefully planned, organized, and executed. In order for genocides to be effective, there is this level of organization that is necessary. As we're going to see, a lot of people will try to excuse genocide away as a result of, well, these people are crazy. These people are psychotic, or as some would claim in other cases, they were possessed by evil spirits or the devil. That's not at all correct. Genocide results from orchestration. Fourthly, even though there are state actors that lead and are at the center of genocide, it's regular citizens, or what you might call non-state actors, who participate in the genocide in various ways. So people like you and me, regular everyday people in these particular contexts, often find themselves actively participating in these acts of terrible violence. And genocide, as we're going to see, can happen anywhere. We'll see examples in Europe, We'll see examples in Central Africa, the Middle East, Asia. It's not a phenomenon that only occurs in particular places, but rather is a development that can occur whether it be in the developed world or in the developing world. Key examples of 20th century genocide. We're going to focus on the 20th century, of course. The first being the Armenian genocide, which occurs during World War I from 1914 into the early 1920s. And this was the Turks' attack on the Armenian ethnic group in their country in what was then called the Ottoman Empire. Today it's called Turkey. The Armenians were believed to have been complicit in Russian army assaults on the Ottoman Empire, and the Turks attacked them for this perceived involvement. The Armenians were also seeking their independence. And during the course of this sustained assault on the Armenians, 1.5 million Armenians would die. The most infamous, the most well-known genocide of the 20th century, of course, is the Holocaust, committed by Nazi Germany between 1939 and 1945, which led to the deaths of 12 million Europeans, 6 million of whom were Jews, but also there were assaults on Poles, on Gypsies. Other ethnic groups in Eastern and Central Europe were also targeted by the Nazis. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, as Yugoslavia fell apart in the early to mid-90s, the new nation of Serbia assaulted their Bosnian Muslim neighbors in 1995. And there's a genocide in Bosnia, which leads to the deaths of many thousands of Bosnian Muslims. And then another case in our class that we're going to talk a lot about is the Rwandan genocide, which unfolds between April and July of 1994. And this is where the Hutu majority government in Rwanda, amid what was that country's civil war, assaulted the Tutsi minority in the small, very tiny nation of Rwanda in Central Africa. And ultimately, this genocide leads to at least 750,000 Tutsis killed by the Hutus. Again, the result here is that 750,000 dead in what was a fragment of the spring and summer months of one particular year. So there you have an explanation of the definition of genocide and some key features to keep in mind, as well as some key examples. In our class, we're going to be talking a lot about the Holocaust and Rwanda very centrally, as well as some other case studies in which we'll explore these definitions and concepts and see how they apply or do not apply. So thank you very much.